All right, welcome everyone to our Jupiter in Libra class part 1. As you can see on your screen, Jupiter is in Libra September 9th, 2016 through October 10th, 2017. Here are the previous Jupiter and Libra cycles. On the left side of your screen is the exact dates that Jupiter was in Libra. On the right side of your screen, here is the overview of the one-year passages of Jupiter and Libra approximately every 12 years. Jupiter and Libra. All failed relationships hurt, but losing someone who doesn't appreciate and respect you is actually a gain, not a loss. Know your self-worth. I think you just muted yourself, Leroy. Thank you if you did. Here's the Jupiter archetype in general, principle of growth and expansion, natural laws and cosmological understandings of the universe, religious and spiritual philosophies, right brain intuition and the sixth sense, and the teacher or guru. Jupiter also relates to the archetype of the future and what is up ahead. Honesty versus lies, integrity principles versus exaggerations, authenticity versus compensations. Jupiter will bring us alienation lessons to help us become authentic with our own self. Integration and assimilation lessons, including assimilating the food we eat in health and wellness astrology. Language and communication lessons, lessons of loss in order to create the space to grow or expand, and lessons of excess, too much of a good thing. Jupiter in Libra, going to go over this faster this time. I'm just going to show it to you on your screen. You can see the polarities, the modalities, and the elements. The polarities are the same, active energy moving outward. So this is good initiation, Jupiter in Libra. Typically the 2 steps forward, 1 step back when we become insecure to regain security. Modalities or qualities of action, mutable to cardinal, mostly harmonious. Mutable makes sense of what cardinal initiates. We're lacking fixed modality, so there can be a lack of creating stability or maintaining the new that we move into. The elements are temperaments, fire, spirit, air, mental. Things can get quite stirred up and go overboard. However, when fire and air are in process of working synergistically with each other, we can have some real creative juices flowing through Jupiter's cycle transit through Libra. Again, good thing for beginning astrologers. Always break any planet, any sign, any house into these 3 divisions of the circle, the 12. And this will help you with basics of understanding a lot of the keywords that come along. Jupiter in Libra initiates transit through the second half of the zodiac from the other one-on-one Libra all the way to Pisces, the ultimate other source itself. This is in contrast to the first 6 archetypes of the zodiac, Aries through Virgo, which concentrates more on self. Do not assume that Libra means balance. Libra is about searching and learning the balance of anything, be it a relationship or a situation in any way, or collective groups of people. Now, what can happen with Libra is we can go to the extremes of imbalance or inequality with anything and anyone, and especially Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter takes things to excess. So Jupiter in Libra can stir up and expand the imbalances. And so it can create those famous arguments with others. I'm right, you're wrong. My religion or belief system is better than yours. My presidential candidate is better than yours. The famous old preaching versus teaching can come into effect here. And what we can find with these inequalities is we create the lines in the sand. No matter what the subject is, we have two opposing sides, and they can get quite stubborn with each other. And when we do have those extremes of imbalances, we run into the sadomasochistic examples. One party is dominating and another party is being dominated. This is going to be a major theme throughout Jupiter and Libra and moving through all of those extremes and imbalances, and hopefully taking one more step towards equality. Now, the thing about Jupiter and Libra, though, is it can take these imbalances and inequalities and the extremes, and because Jupiter is that expansion of growth and understanding, how we make sense of our world, these imbalances can be made conscious when Jupiter's in Libra. And the reason for this is Venus, ruler of two signs, Libra and Taurus. Venus rules the ears. So Venus through Taurus will rule literally the anatomy of the ear, the ability to physically be able to hear someone when they are speaking. In addition to that, Taurus rules all five senses, the other four as well. Through Libra, Venus is a ruler, Libra then as an archetype, 7th house, rules the psychology of the ear, which means listening in order to hear something from another person or party's point of view. It is called that psychology of listening. This would be one of the best intents of Jupiter and Libra, to actually slow down the defensiveness and reaction and be able to listen to what another person's saying from their perspective. Now with communications, this is going to bring that famous feedback loop. This is what I heard you say. Is it what you actually meant? And going back and forth in communications until both parties or multiple parties feel that they're on common ground, same perspective. And then what this allows further is to actually give to another person as they need to be given to, versus projecting what we want to give to them. When we take the time to listen to another person and hear what they are saying beyond the words or through the words, we're going to pick up on what their needs and desires are. And that's going to then allow us to do deep, generous giving, Jupiter and Libra, versus here's what I want to give you in order to make myself happy. And so when we get into that psychology of listening deeply, it allows for mutual giving and receiving as each person needs and desires. What happens when we are not listening, or we are into the extremes of inequality or unequal situations and relationships? We have less than and more than. And so the less than side with Jupiter and Libra will be the victim, the masochist, or the person who's being dominated in the relationship. And what this will create through Jupiter and Libra and emphasize through the retrograde in Aries, any slide that I'm looking at here, or that you're looking at here, that states Jupiter and Libra, these are the same lessons that will then be brought up, expanded, intensified during Jupiter's retrograde for 4 months next year, February through June. More on that later. So when we are on the victim or being dominated side, Jupiter in Libra is going to bring lessons of learning how to stand up for ourselves, to speak up for ourselves in order to create that equality. So we will be exposed to how we are being controlled by someone else if that is the case. Again, the victim consciousness, you can say, is going to be exposed. Jupiter, expansions in consciousness and understanding, exposed to how others are manipulating or controlling them. And so this is going to bring lessons then in holding healthy boundaries in that relationship when you stand up, speak up. No, it's not unfair that I work and I'm responsible for all the bills while you sit on the couch and play video games. Either you get to work or we're going to have to go to plan B. You have to contribute your share to the expenses in the relationship. You can see the examples of be anything, including sex. And it will also bring this lesson then to the point of if the other person isn't willing to let go of being so controlling or dominating, if they're not willing to make changes towards equality, Jupiter and Libra may bring about the ending in relationships. You may see an increase statistically, for instance, in the U.S. in relationship endings or divorce, or just watching it all your social networks where somebody says, that's enough, I just can't do this anymore. And so what's going to be underneath this then is, again, that psychology of self-worth, to evolve on our own, Aries polarity, however is necessary, and evolve that relationship as well. It's going to lead us into Jupiter having deep pondering as to where this behavior is coming from in whatever type of relationship this is taking place. Do we have natural guilt that we've been atoning for? Do we have natural guilt that we've over-atoned for into the fact that we've went into conditioned guilt? Have we been brought up with conditioned guilt in which the woman always submits to the man in a marriage type ceremony relationship, etc., etc.? There has to be pondering of where this origin of behavior is coming from, so that Jupiter and Libra can take that necessary action to change the behavior. Jupiter and Libra is going to be about changing relationship behavior left and right all over the place. And then, if we're on the less than side of the equation in equality, there has to be a continued, remember, no fixed modality. We have to make a sustained effort to keep changing, to not go back. The female in a relationship who's abused leaves, the male promises to change, she comes back, and everything goes back to the old patterns. Does she have the courage to leave again, or leave for good, or stand up for counseling, or whatever it is? There is going to be insecurity on this less than side of the equation. And so they're going to have to move through the insecurity. Libra's cardinal, 2 steps forward, 1 step back when we become insecure. There has to, again, sustained effort to make these changes in relationships as we perceive them. Here's a quick little slide on when it's time to move on from a relationship. I don't have to repeat all these for you. Living in the past, the relationship brings you more joy than pain. Expectations, we'll talk about that, expecting them to change. They expect you to change. There is emotional, physical, mental hurt. Nothing changes. The same situation keeps being repeated. Partner makes no effort. No one's allowed to grow. Or what if Jupiter in Libra, you don't value being with this person anymore? Those who live in a culture where it's okay to say, this is the Y in the road. It just doesn't work for me anymore. Relative to the last 2,000 years of the Piscean Age, the last 10,000 years of patriarchal principles, it's become so much the norm to have inequality in relationships. We support victimization. We support women being inferior to men. Jupiter and Libra, especially with the oppositions to Uranus, the squares to Pluto, can turn this upside down on its head. Relationships will be major themes way beyond this presidential election. If we're coming from the more than extreme, we're the victor, we're the sadist in extremes, or we're the one that has to dominate and be controlling in the relationship, then we have lessons of learning to play fair, to make adjustments. What happens is you're going to be thrown back to the Virgo archetype, learning the inverted pyramid to put yourself on the bottom, and how do I really learn how to serve another in order to move into those relationships of equality. There's lessons of learning to let go of the control. Ultimately, we don't get to control anyone but ourselves. But again, patriarchal imbalances, we've become pretty good at these control games. So the more than side of the relationship risks getting left by those being dominated if they're successful in standing up for themselves and the dominating party does not make changes. It can go to the extremes of the legal system stepping in, having, what do they call them, restraining orders, or even to the point of being arrested and put in jail for abuse, especially something like physical abuse. Of course, in its extremes, we can have the revenge actions going on. Obviously, the homicides, suicides, in relationships have been going on long before Jupiter and Libra. It's part of that bigger backdrop of the inequality between the genders in relationship. This is just going to come to the forefront more and more, to whereby we may see changes in the legal systems, Jupiter ruling the philosophies behind the laws we make. We could see changes in where we just won't put up with this anymore. And even though I'm using specific female male gender examples, by all means, I do not mean it that way. The dominated one can be the man, the dominating one can be the woman. And so what we have here still, though, is again, not only that psychology of listening, but Jupiter, because of its right brain and wanting to understand the causal things behind the manifestations or the effects. Jupiter, as much as Scorpio, will also relate to psychology. And when Libra gets into really listening, that brings in psychology as well. You can see all of these signs in that second half of the zodiac really starting to get deeper and broader in their understandings beyond self. So here we're also going to look at the psychology of being able to honor someone else, to honor their freedom, Libra polarity, to honor their individuality, Aries polarity, their individuality, Aries polarity, and to honor them in equal ways in order to have evolution through Jupiter and Libra. This side of the equation also has to have a deep pondering on how they got caught up into these extremes of inequality and imbalance in relating, whereby the less than sign will be orientated towards why and what do I have to do different. The more than side will many times have to be forced into this pondering to the extremes of being left all alone, living by themselves, or the extremes of being locked up in confinement in jail. And they are also learning to give first as another actually needs, back to that psychology of listening that we talked about. Jupiter in Libra. Never let someone who adds very little to our relationship control so much of it. When I encounter people who try to make me feel lesser than equal, I don't argue. My equality is not up for debate. It is an implicit truth. This is a carryover from Jupiter and Virgo. I was looking at this and I go, whoa, wait a minute. Jupiter carries everything to excess and extreme. So does Libra. Libra with that extremes of inequality and imbalance. And so we must be careful. Everything can be taken to excess and extreme in relationships with ourselves and others, individually and collectively. Good and bad. All you have to look at collectively in the presidential election is one candidate being held to one extreme in regards to civil behavior and the other one to a different one. No matter what issue you start to look at, those of you who listen to the weekly podcast, I have decided to read The Blade and The Chalice and the Blade by Riane Eisler from cover to cover. I had not read it thoroughly, and I am just fascinated by it and so enjoying it. It is my chosen response to step back from all this extremism that's going on in the U.S. with the candidates and my own Jupiter in Libra wanting to find its Aries polarity. Of course, I have Mars conjunct Libra new phase. I can do that when necessary and sometimes go too overboard. And all you have to do is just, it's provided me with a real backdrop of that big picture of how unequal we are with the genders, and yet how time marches on and we're in process of changing that come hell or high water if we don't destroy ourselves. Jupiter with the Uranus-Pluto T-square, stay tuned. So Jupiter in Libra really is learning how to balance giving versus receiving. And it's not two people going out for a date and going Dutch with the meal. They can, but they can also choose to take turns. I pay for the meal, then it's your turn to pay for the meal. However, if you end up paying twice for the meal or 3 times for the meal and the other person hasn't paid anything, even if it's a friendship situation, then we bring up that lesson of when not giving is the best giving, because Libra can get so invested in the other, it can give, and that's why sometimes the Pluto and Libra generation as parents are called the helicopter parents. They hover over the child so much, the child has no Aries independence or freedom, and they never have to grow up and accept responsibility for mistakes of learning their own lessons. So when we learn that not giving as the ultimate giving, in essence, we're allowing another person to learn the lesson for themselves when necessary. And again, this goes way beyond an intimate marriage type relationship. For those of you who can't see my little pink post-it, I do not crave anyone who will fix me. Just someone who will hold my hand while I fix myself. Another way of talking about that balance in giving and receiving. So Jupiter in Libra can have exposure of all the games or masks that people will wear in order to appear differently than their actual self. Remember authenticity versus compensations with Jupiter, honesty versus lies, what was it? Being real versus compensating. I can't remember what it is. You know it. You've got the slides. But you get the point here of what we're starting to talk about. So Libra can put on these rose-colored glasses towards other people and just see everything as nice and sweet and pleasant, and then get surprised when something blows up in their face. So we've got to learn to be able to have an honest evaluation, Libra word, of any situation that's going on in our world, be it a spouse or a parent-child or two friends. A little bit tougher than the employee versus the employer, but there was a pretty well-known female TV personality who found the guts to file lawsuits just before Jupiter went into Libra, but you could see it got subtle, Jupiter in Libra, that her boss was sexual harassment. And of course it got poo-pawed and poo-pawed, and all of a sudden there were other women that started speaking out, and all of a sudden it changed. There was an honest evaluation of it versus the lie or the compensation or the denial or pretending it doesn't exist. One of the other things we can find with the archetype of Libra, someone being very nice to your face and then cutting you down the moment your back is turned. I grew up in a household like that where one of my parents did that, and I remember being a child going, something's not right here. How come my father smiles in front of them, and then once they go out the door, he's bitching? So you've really got to work with that with Jupiter and Libra. If I can't say it to your face, then don't say it behind their back. Jupiter retrograde can find that exposed in all kinds of ways. We'll also have the dawning of personality traits and alter egos in order to be liked by someone else. This is Jupiter and Libra getting overly invested in a relationship of some type. Some of the keywords, key phrase that I brought up with this is the karma chameleons. Which one of my many personalities would you like me to put on in order for you to like me? And I remember when I've come through a lot of relationship growth on an intimate level in my life. And I remember when I first started dating Leroy, and I had one of my best friends go through a laundry list of questions. Can you introduce him to your parents? Will he go to one of your New Age events? Does he, and everything was about honesty and equality. I forget, she has like a gazillion planets in Libra, and I was, and all she did was ask like the series of 10 or 12 questions when I told her, I'm getting ready to go on my third or fourth date with this guy, and it really exposed, oh, here's someone who really wants to meet me as an equal. This is the most, equality I've had in a relationship. Yahoo, maybe I really did learn something the first 40 years of my life. And so letting go of all of this stuff, and with the Aries polarity, just being who we authentically are, so that the person doesn't get surprises and they're free to say yes or no depending upon who we actually are. And there's nothing worse than playing games with that kind of stuff and then attracting someone else who does this, and you get blown away when you find out they're still married. Again,
these relationship scenarios are going to be all over the place through Jupiter and Libra. Another one that can typically come in here with Libra as well is, here's Libra passive, here's Aries aggressive. The passive aggressive behaviors versus just speaking up and being honest. I don't want to do this. This is what works for me. Does this work for you? If not, can we compromise, or do we have to find the why in the road? Libra can be really good at that passive aggressive stuff, and it can be subtle, dominating behavior. It can be insecurity or dominated behavior, getting frustrated that they bought into it. There can be all kinds of scenarios of how this can come along. But if you find yourself in the midst of doing any passive aggressive behavior things, just go, okay, take a deep breath, Aries, find the courage to just say it. Honesty. Jupiter and Libra, those good old projections and expectations. Jupiter and Libra can project ideals onto a partner or a situation or experience, and they can have those famous letdowns when the reality of the person or the situation shows up. Jupiter and Libra can project what they expect in any relationship or situation onto another person, place, or thing, and again, have that disappointment. We can also find that Jupiter and Libra can expect everyone else to operate with high morals and honesty. I remember being on a rebound in my mid-20s when my first marriage broke up, and I had a divorce settlement and I went through the evolutionary lesson of loaning most of that money out to someone without really checking them out. And I did my own projection onto them and figured, if I loan somebody money, naturally they're going to pay me back. This is going to be one of the worst areas and biggest lessons we can run into, because Jupiter is one of the resource planets. And Jupiter and Libra can expect everyone to operate as we ourselves operate. In the same respect, we can expect everyone to be a con artist, and so I'm going to con them before they con me. Another archetype of Jupiter and Libra is communication excesses without action. Doing all the talking and no walk. Let me talk to this person. Let me get that opinion. Let me check this out. You notice some of those Libra conversations where you just start going round and round in circles. That's the same thing. Jupiter, sometimes I find Libra is very good at hello, but they can't say goodbye. And I've learned throughout the years that I can just cut them off. And they're a cardinal archetype, and most of the time they're okay with it. Oh, sure, yeah, abrupt goodbyes. Yep, okay, bye, see you next time. Yep, we'll pick up where we left off. But we can also have here the fear of taking action, the fear of the change. And so when this is the case, we'll have all the talks and debates and conversations, etc., because Jupiter in Libra is trying to just control how it's going to move forward. And that 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it wants all the security of the future there before it acts. And we don't get that with Jupiter in Libra. We have got to take the action and then see cardinal modality what the reaction is. That works for all 4 cardinal signs: Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Jupiter and Libra, we're going to have those lessons in objectivity, and the expanding awareness of it. Just like we can assume Jupiter in Libra is full of balance, we can assume that Jupiter is objective, and that may not be the case. Jupiter and Libra were meant to have an exposure to a diversity of relationships with all of the corresponding different beliefs in order to have the feedback to evolve our own belief. Listening to someone's beliefs, perspectives, opinions on any subject doesn't mean you have to agree with it or accept it. But in process of listening to that, your own may change, or it may even reinforce where you are at, knowing, oh, I do recognize that I'm much more accepting of diversity in relationships than my neighbor who is just lambasting the lesbian couple across the street coming to our neighborhood. The other thing, the opposite of this, is the lack of diversity. And when we, Jupiter and Libra, don't want to relate or talk to anybody who has different beliefs or political opinions than we do, we're going to get stuck into maintaining and even expanding those religious beliefs in general, or whatever we believe about relationships in particular. It may bring some of those Aries polarity upsets. We may expand, we may not. Remember, Jupiter in general, think of a placid pond, and you drop the pebble in from on top and you have those expanding ripples of awareness. That's Jupiter in general. And so Jupiter in Libra is expanding those ripples in regards to relationship beliefs and relating patterns and how we get along and how big is your relationship circle without losing a sense of self and your own identity, and allowing both self-identity and relationship diversity to expand. So can you see how this also then will bring lessons in expanding our social skills and how we participate in relationships one-on-one or groups like-minded or diverse? Now, I think I got one more. So Jupiter also can get extremely frustrated with any sense of losing its freedom. Remember, Jupiter is the element of fire, and the three fire archetypes, Aries, Leo, Sag, which Jupiter rules, all have that special sense of destiny, the spark of fire. And fire wants the freedom to go wherever it goes. It doesn't want to burn out. It doesn't want to be controlled. It wants to go where it wants to go. And so Jupiter in Libra can increase frustrations because it's freedom versus commitment. It's freedom versus our job or a situation confining us. And what Jupiter in Libra can do is it can resort to those good old manipulations in order to have control of the relationship or situation, or to have that sense of freedom maintained at any cost. So Jupiter in Libra has to look at freedom versus commitment or confinement, and it has to learn how to balance the two. It's not a question of either or, and we can find those extremes with Jupiter and Libra. The person who is so invested in freedom, they won't move towards a relationship no matter how compatible it will be. And the codependency of Jupiter in Libra, who becomes so enmeshing an alter ego that they won't have anything to do with their own freedom, and it gets blown up in their face because the partner leaves or the partner dies. And so there has to be the balance of the two. The freedom to do what we want, to still be that Aries polarity individual in whatever relationships we have going on. And then that self-responsibility to meet any of our relationship commitments or roles, work demands, any social roles that we may be playing out there in the world. Okay, so I think this is the end of my Jupiter and Libra slides, and I'm probably not an all-inclusive list, so if there's something I didn't remember, you're welcome. If Leroy's having technical problems, perhaps you can do the Q&A back and forth with him, and he seemed to have got himself unmuted with me, so maybe he could do that again. I'm going to move on into the next section after I take a drink. You see the emphasis in relationships, though, yep. Oh, I do have one more slide. Health and wellness. So I put, go ahead, Leroy, question, comment?
No, I just wanted to let you know that I'm hot again, so to speak.
Okay,
Hot
gotcha.
on call.
Okay.
And hot in relationships.
Okay, Jupiter and Libra, did I hear what I thought you said? Because my laptop has been burning hot, literally, and I've had to put ice packs under it as I've been prepping for class the last couple of days. So when you said that, you know what I heard? Oh no, something wrong with your computer? Another one?
Well, we have fire and air energy in the sky, everyone, so that's what we're dealing with. And
well, there's Jupiter and Libra jumping to, you know, extremes of what I thought you said.
Anyway, thanks for your patience, everyone, and thanks for your feedback on the Q&A board as we went through our little issue there at the communications.
Well, Mercury retrograde is not going to let us control every single webinar. It wants to be heard sometimes. And so I decided to put up the health and wellness archetypes for Jupiter and Libra. And you can know that all of these can co-create with each other, okay? Jupiter, in essence, of course, rules the right brain. So it's the assimilation of all the information that comes at us. Jupiter has co-rulership of the liver with Pluto. Jupiter has co-rulership of the breath with Mercury. And I like to say Mercury, breath in, Jupiter, exhale, breath out. That is Gemini Sag. Jupiter rules assimilation overall. Again, whether it's information or it is the food that you put between your two lips. It rules our overall balance. When you have good Jupiter, you can be good with dance. I love to dance, but I didn't always have the best of balance. Leroy thinks I still don't have good balance. And we were talking about it sometime over the summer where I tripped over something. And I says, Leroy, why do you think I took dance lessons for 20 plus years? That's how I learned to be more in my body and to ground my Jupiter Libra into more and more balance on my 2 feet. Jupiter has co-rulership of the pancreas with Pluto, sciatic nerve, the hip joints, the thighs. Jupiter has co-rulership. I forgot, the thyroid should be in here. Thyroid, pituitary gland, prostate. Jupiter has co-rulership with Saturn, all right? Hyperthyroid, excess metabolism, assimilation, hypothyroid, slow metabolism, assimilation. Same thing with the pituitary gland. It's the master gland, growth, Jupiter, decay, Saturn. Jupiter co-rules excessive growth of
all kinds. So when you start and look at to Libra's areas, oops, that one doesn't belong there. When you start looking at the Libra areas, kidneys, adrenals, co-ruler with Mars. Remember ears, blood and circulation imbalances with Mars. Venus in particular rules white blood cells, rules the lower back, ovaries in females, blood sugar disorders such as diabetes, hypoglycemia, urinary infections and disorders, because Jupiter can have excessive growth. Can you see how everything in this area can start to go out of whack with Jupiter in Libra? And even though autoimmune imbalances are, Neptune rules the immune system, I put autoimmune imbalances in here because white blood cell counts go up when we have infections or inflammation or an attack to the system. And remember, Libra is the other. This will include insect bites. We could see more of this in the news coming up. So again, all of these are possible imbalances that we could look at through Jupiter in Libra. Look at where we are with the Zika virus right now with Jupiter in Libra. Expect this to be more in the news. So here's this slide. You know, I'm famous for saying diet, exercise, and rest. And when I went to look for a symbol of that, I found gazillion little posters here of the 6 best doctors. I hadn't read this yet, but as you can see, diet, exercise, and rest all come in here in the midst of all of these. And so Jupiter in Libra is going to ask us to have a balance. If you're not exercising, you know, you're not going to metabolize and assimilate your food as well as you could. If you're not drinking enough water, that's part of the whole diet thing. If we're too stressed out in the westernized world and not getting enough rest, then, you know, Jupiter will overreact to things, especially if there's something going on in our world of relationships. Again, I have natal Jupiter in Libra, so if you have that signature or you have Jupiter in the 7th house, I can reflect now after almost 6 Jupiter cycles around the circle and realize that other things in my chart add on to this, but my Jupiter in Libra will just react so intensely and I'll just immediately go overboard and I will not have heard what the person actually said. Now this is when I'm in some type of connection in the relationship. When I'm on my happy headset over the phone or Skype with a client and I've never met them, I don't know what they look like, and I'm just all Jupiter listening to them, then I can be very detached and work with them. So can you see how Jupiter starts to bring in the balance, whether it's not only the relationships, but it's also going to be a balance between diet, exercise, and rest. And there's no substitutes for that. And so look at what Jupiter in Virgo has done over the last year. Brought the whole issues of diet, exercise, and rest into our consciousness. Perhaps you started some new health program. Perhaps you procrastinated starting a new health program if it's necessary. And so here's Libra going, oh, I can see you're going to extremes here. What needs to shift? What needs to change with balance? So you get the point of what I'm speaking about here with Jupiter. And again, just briefly going over the health and wellness. I'll see if I can get some tidbits to that
next week, part 2, with Jupiter and Libra through the 12 houses. So here is starting Jupiter in its relationships to the other planets. And of course, the Sun being one of the most important ones we have. Here's their conjunctions 2 weeks from tonight on the 26th, 4 degrees Libra, and their year-long cycle, October, 3-4 degrees Scorpio. Here's Sun. Sun has a tendency to always have trines to Jupiter when it goes through its retrograde cycle. More on the planetary oppositions to Jupiter in a couple of slides here. But what we could look for with Sun Jupiter is extremes coming out. You know, the selfishness extremes, all of the inequalities that we talked about, especially when Jupiter goes retrograde, because the Sun is going to be in Aries then. There is such potential to have extremes of violence, war, patriarchal grabs that could go on. You can just, you know, start to see all of that. We could have more Supreme Court rulerships taking place in regards to Jupiter ruling the scale, you know, ruling justice, ruling laws, and Libra, the scales of justice. We could find a lot of legal things that might start to come out in the news here. And as a matter of fact, for me, the bottom line, being a U.S. citizen and voting in the election, the bottom line why I'm going to vote for a Democratic candidate is because of Supreme Court justices. We're down to 8. They're not going to get the 9th one until after the election, and there are 3 of those justices who are getting up there in age. And so whoever is the next president has the potential to nominate anywhere from 1 to 4 Supreme Court justices that will really, really swing the balance, Aries Libra, or inclusive versus exclusive, or liberal versus conservative. Now, the potential with the Jupiter Sun cycle is achieving new equalities, be it racial, gender, economic, religious, any way you want to look at it. You know, doesn't mean we're going to have the extremes. We can have the balance. Energize it. Use your intuition to go in that direction, and in my case, I'm going to use my ballot box to go in that direction. It's my choice. I don't care what your choice is. You have the freedom to choose whatever you want. Just like I gave my mother her freedom to vote the way she wants, I'd appreciate it if everybody else would give me the same thing. I'm getting a lot of feedback here lately from people in a couple of different directions on the presidential election. Jupiter retrograde in Libra, here's the dates. Jupiter goes retrograde February 6th, 23 degrees Libra. Again, you saw the opposition to the Sun, 18 degrees Aries Libra. And then Jupiter will go direct June 9th at 13 Libra. Jupiter always has a 4-month retrograde cycle, and it always moves forward about a month every year, turning retrograde. Last year, Jupiter was retrograde January through May. Now we're February through June. Next year, March through July. Distortions, just briefly. Really turning on each other, the good old lines in the sand, increasing inequality. Potentials, recognizing that we are all in it together on planet Earth. Honoring our own needs equal to another person's needs. In other words, relationships are only as good as any individual continues to grow in ever-evolving independence and interdependence. That good old balance between self and others. Now, every slide here, can be emphasized during Jupiter retrograde in Libra, as I said before. Here is that opposition of Sun to Jupiter on April 7th, 2017. What we're going to have with Jupiter's retrograde is it's going to reactivate the Uranus-Pluto squares. Remember, Uranus to Pluto are still in orbit. They're first quarter squares, even though they're beyond 90 degrees. They had 7 first quarter squares, 2012 through 2015. The seventh one was March 2015. In the last year and a half, have you noticed Uranus 90 degrees beyond Pluto, just how diametrically opposed we've gotten to each other in so many countries and areas of the world? I mean, we're living it here in the United States. Now look at Libra, Jupiter in Libra for a year. Jupiter's going to have 3 oppositions to Uranus. It's going to have 3 last quarter squares to Pluto. So it's like we are going through the first quarter squares all over again. And it is going to increase the tempers and the words and the battles. Are we going to battle it out, or are we going to compromise? Stay tuned as it unfolds. Here is a highlight of Jupiter's retrograde aspects. There are oppositions from all the inner planets, from Mars to Mercury to Sun to Venus. And as we'll go through on an individual basis, Jupiter has 4 different aspects, 5 with the North Node that it's going to go through during its retrograde cycle. And so this is a slide that you might actually want to refer to every so often as you are going through this Jupiter and Libra cycle, especially Jupiter's retrograde from February through June. And you can see where this gets activated for you in your chart. The Nodal Access, remember last year, North Node Virgo, Jupiter in Virgo. Jupiter had 3 conjunctions to the North Node, really emphasizing self-improvement, the diet, exercise, and rest, emphasizing learning how to be of service to another so we could relate as equals. Here's the test. The North Node is going to make these 3 waxing semi-squares. The South Node is making 3 waning sesquisquadrates. So what we have to be careful of with the South Node is the distortions that resort into con games and power struggles or disillusionment. What difference does it make? And the North Node coming off of that conjunction to Jupiter and now in Virgo and now Libra, what is fairest for all concerned? And with a semi-square sesquisquadrate, okay, we're moving from new phase to crescent and from full phase to disseminating. Energy shifts inward. What do I have to do differently? Anytime it's the nodal axis, emotions get involved. So relative to these aspects, we can have emotional tensions and deliberations or confusion over what's best for me versus what's best for others. How do I balance moving forward with others, not compromising on myself, standing up for myself when necessary, not trying to blow one over on anybody else, not doing any emotional manipulations. While these may be aspects that we kind of gloss over in the larger picture of the nodal cycle to Jupiter, this is a test point. These aspects are test points to see how well we are going towards fairness and equality from Jupiter and Virgo's lessons last year. I thought I'd put these up. I haven't seen this movie yet. I don't know how old it is. Speciesism. I was looking for equality amongst all species, and these are some of the images that came up. Each and every animal on earth has as much right to be here as you and me. Homosexuality is found in 1,500 species. Homophobia is found in 1 species. Which one is natural? And then of course you can get the pyramid effect versus the circle effect of all the different species. You know, this is part of Jupiter through Virgo, now moving into Jupiter and Libra. Can we have equality regardless of the species? Can we have the honoring of all life forms on planet Earth as a cohesive whole or unit? Mercury has an opposition to Jupiter during its retrograde, and then it has 3 waning sesqui-squadrates about a year from now, a year's retrograde cycle from now. As you can see on your screen, Mercury in Virgo again, and Jupiter in Libra. And so these two, Mercury's going to get involved as Jupiter in Libra finishes up its annual cycle. And it's going to give us another chance to figure out how we can all get along, help each other out, be kind to each other. If not, we can see, or in some areas we can see these distortions in which there can be exclusion or outright cruelty to others, be they human or other species. Now, because Mercury's left brain and Jupiter's right brain, as we have this Mercury retrograde cycle a year from now, there's going to be a progressive orientation towards the other person and the other group. And it reminded me of EA's mantra for Libra. I balance a diversity of relationships with my own initiative. Now, all of that, this right here was more of this one Jupiter retrograde cycle that's actually going to interact with Jupiter over the next year. But here's the Mercury opposition, where it will be me versus you on some verbal level. Still, can we balance self with others? Here's Venus with Jupiter next year. While we have a Venus retrograde March 4th through April 15th of 2017 from 27 Aries, or 13 Aries to 27 Pisces, excuse me. This Venus retrograde will not bring us any specific aspects with Jupiter. So here's the conjunction that we just had to next year's conjunction, and of course the Venus retrograde opposition to Jupiter. Again, you can go back a couple of slides to where I put all of those Jupiter retrograde aspects where it will be most intense of me versus you, and how do we balance the needs for all of us. And again, Venus is going to be inclusive versus exclusive as the themes, because we are going to have a Venus retrograde cycle in Aries. We can have a warrior goddess energy, making it okay to be violent. Now, healthy warrior goddess is standing up for social justice. It doesn't mean picking up the sword or the blade. That's the patriarchal distortions of it. It means slow down. Let's take time to communicate here. Let's find the common ground. Let's find the compromise. Healthy warrior goddess with Venus in Aries stands up and works to achieve equality between any of the dynamics that are going on. So you can see that, you know, we want universal justice regardless of the subject. Here's Mars. Mars is going to make 2 aspects to Jupiter, where came off of Mars retrograde this year, so there's no Mars retrograde in 2017. You can see the conjunction that they had a year ago, last fall in mid-Virgo. Mars is a 2-year cycle with the outer planets. Here is going to be the next conjunction between them at 18 Scorpio. Mars does have an opposition to Jupiter when it's retrograde, 26 degrees Aries here you can see. And so during this time period, when Mars initiates this 2-year cycle through the zodiac in January 27th to March 9th, Mars in Aries, this is going to intensify, even though they're only going to make that one opposition, okay? They're going to be opposing each other by signs, and Mars is going to be in its own sign. So can you see this Mars in Aries and then followed by the Venus retrograde in Aries? Can you see how these two are going to be opposing Jupiter? Again, include, exclude, inclusive, exclusive. Are we going to go with war and violence and inequality, or are we going to search for peace? Jupiter and Libra, it is about negotiating peace if everybody is willing to do so. I also think that we can see some gender issues in the news again. I think they'll be in the news the whole time, with Jupiter making a T-square to Uranus and Pluto, and Jupiter in Libra, and then Mars in Aries and the Venus retrograde in Aries. We'll continue to see gender issues in the news, the distortions and the evolution to new equal rights. So I put these three up. Gender equality is not a woman's issue. It is a human issue. It affects us all. We've begun to raise daughters more like sons, but few have the courage to raise our sons more like daughters. Quote from Gloria Steinem. And of course you can probably see the Hillary quote. We need to make equal pay and equal opportunity for women and girls a reality, so women's rights are human rights once and for all. I think this equal pay right situation and equal rights between men and women could be in the news over this next year with Jupiter and Libra. Let's see how it goes. If you live in the more Scandinavian countries, you find that in most of those areas, women on a what would I say, regional and national level in Scandinavian countries hold somewhere like 40 to 45% of elected offices. Here in the U.S., that percentage is more like 10% on a regional, national level. Stay tuned. Here we start looking at Jupiter with the outer planets. Jupiter is going to make 3 aspects to each of these. The waning in conjuncts to Chiron in Pisces, the oppositions to Uranus in Aries, the waning in conjuncts to Neptune in Pisces, and the waning squares to Pluto in Capricorn. So as we said before, Jupiter is going to activate the Uranus-Pluto first quarter square orb. Here is another slide that I thought I would just put in because, remember, Jupiter is going to make oppositions to Uranus. I'll show you this again in a visual slide when we have a chart. But after Jupiter makes these oppositions to Uranus, Jupiter is going to be waning half of the circle to Saturn, Chiron, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. All 5 of the outer planetary archetypes that I look at anyway. Jupiter's going to be in last half of the cycle to them, which got me wondering, when is Jupiter going to make conjunctions? Look at this between 2020 and 2024. Jupiter's going to have 3 conjunctions to Capricorn, or excuse me, to Pluto in Capricorn before transiting Capricorn conjuncts natal Pluto in the U.S. chart. Jupiter's going to have 1 conjunction to Saturn in 2020 at 0.5 Aquarius. 2022, 1 conjunction to Neptune, 24 Pisces. 2023, 1 conjunction to Chiron, 14-15 Aries. And 2024, 1 conjunction to Uranus at 22 degrees Taurus. When I recognized that, Prepon, I was like, wow. I mean, Jupiter in the waning half to these outer planets, it points toward deepening, broadening understanding. It points towards evolution. The big question is, are we going to do it? Are we going to evolve, or are we going to regress? Stay tuned, because I don't think there's ever been more of a starker choice for the U.S. in our presidential elections. Listening from other countries, you may be having similar choices. You may be further along that evolutionary scale than us. There may be a few of you more regressed than the U.S. We're all in different places, but on that big, broad scale, Jupiter in Libra is really going to bring this equality into the equation, and broader increasing equality. That's a pretty tight snapshot to have 4 years and conjunctions to all 5 outer planetary archetypes. Here's the visual of this. Again, Jupiter is in oppositions to Uranus, last quarter squares to Pluto. Here it's waning to Saturn, it's waning to Neptune, and it's waning to Chiron. So all of these planets right here, Jupiter is going to march into surrender till you get that list of conjunctions that I spoke about. Again, this is the Jupiter opposition. Now, in 2016, remember I kept saying, for those of you who listened on the podcast, the spiritual T-square, Jupiter was having oppositions, 1 to Neptune, 3 to Chiron, squares to Saturn, and the Nodal Access was in there. So in 2016, we've more or less had the spiritual T-square with Jupiter, trying to understand it all, trying to make sense of it all. 2017, I'm calling it the initiation T-square. 3 cardinal signs. How are we going to move forward? As I review the spiritual T-square from the U.S. perspective, we got some pretty strong ideological lines in the sand going on, you think? Or is that going to lead us? Initiating those lines in the sand more yet? So just Jupiter, last quarter squares, Uranus past those first quarter squares, crises themes in all areas of life to affect evolution. It really is asking us to be open-minded in order to evolve. And the opposite is regressing backwards into greater and greater inequality. If by some chance we do, we still have in the larger picture 3 transiting Pluto conjunctions to U.S. natal Pluto in 2022. I've been saying the last half of this decade, the first half of next decade, gonna be a lot going on. How are you going to choose to act, Jupiter and Libra? Here's Jupiter's relationship to Saturn. Remember that spiritual T-square? Jupiter had 3 last quarter squares. What is no longer working in life and society? That's going to continue because Jupiter is moving towards this next conjunction that I mentioned earlier. In Libra, they're only going to have 1 last quarter sextile. Now we have to be careful of a tendency for despondency. Nothing will change. We have to be careful, Libra, wishy-washy. I don't want to take a stand. I don't want to be part of the broader picture of change going on here. Jupiter and Libras must listen to Saturn in Sagittarius truce and inklings of future changes. And as they move from last quarter square to balsamic phase here, what are the seed thoughts coming through that we can start to implement on social levels? Jupiter and Saturn are the social planets. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars are very personal, and you can almost recognize that through your astrological studies. Jupiter and Saturn is, I call them the social planets. They're where we start to step out into society. Jupiter, learn how it works, learn how to get along with others. Saturn, then we move into our roles in society and mature. They're the boundaries of the conscious planets. Then we move into the unconscious planets, moving out. So Jupiter-Saturn cycles are 20-year cycles. You can see when the last one started on your screen. So how, what's our social roles? And as we're looking at the waning of a 20-year social growth and decay cycle and what's not working, at the same time, remember, loss exposes space that then gives us seed thoughts to move into. Seed thoughts can come through before the conjunctions. Where is this happening for you personally? How are you involved with it collectively? Jupiter Chiron. I decided that I wanted to put the previous conjunctions in and the next one, because we're moving and finishing up these cycles. Jupiter Chiron as a planetary pair in general is, to me, as I watched these conjunctions and I was involved in metaphysics and alternative healing and all kinds of stuff for the last 16 years, if not longer, I really noticed that quantum physics phrase just go off the charts the last part of last decade. So Jupiter Chiron as a planetary pair is just the evolution of our intuitive healing abilities. Chiron was discovered in 1978, and that since then we've just had a wave of self-healing awareness, body-mind connection. People are getting it. Thoughts are things, energy flows where attention goes. Starting to recognize this as a planetary pair with Jupiter Chiron. Master your thoughts and you will master your life. True healing always begins with your thoughts, or the energy that you're putting into something, the attention you're giving to something. Are you giving attention to the imbalance or the healing? So Jupiter and Libra with Chiron, we have 3 waning inconjuncts or quincunxes, the 210-degree aspect. These are the outer adjustments versus the waxing inconjunct inner adjustments. And so sadomasochistic patterns from Jupiter in Virgo can still be brought into the light of day here, and the potential to break free from these distorted patterns, dominated into more natural spiritual principles of understanding, especially about relationship equality. We have to be careful here because we can re-imprint victimization, or we can self-heal those old wounds. We've got to find objectivity around denial and addictions. Alternative healing systems might find a broader acceptance. This could also have, even though in some ways the consensus might undermine, it can also bring about some consensus recognitions of alternative ways, especially being less expensive on the pocketbooks and gaining credibility in that way. I see these aspects having an effect on, in the U.S., the whole Obamacare and what we are going to do in that direction. Our Republican senator had one of our 2 Republican senators in our state had a letter to the editor in the paper today, lambasting Obamacare and its costs. And I read it because I wanted to know, what are his solutions? There wasn't one solution. There wasn't one example other than elect a Republican president without saying a name, and we'll make the changes we need to create better equality with health care. And I'm like, okay, what's your plan? What are you guys going to propose moving forward? And here we have to understand the death and decay cycles between Jupiter and Saturn. I don't know why I have Saturn in there. That needs to be, well, this is in general. And I don't know why I put that in there. With Chiron, and do we have an ability to heal or not? Or do we fall into greater decay? The waxing in conjuncts and the waning in conjuncts, which are 150, you understand that's the 0 Virgo point. However, and the 210, which is the 0 Scorpio point, they're both known as health crises in general, specifically health and wellness crises, in addition to crises of inner adjustments and outer adjustments in relationships. Jupiter-Uranus, here's their last conjunctions. First one was in Aries and then 2 in Pisces, if you remember those. And here's the next one coming up. This is the last of those outer planet conjunctions. This is Uranus really busting it out when you look at those 5 outer planet conjunctions. As a pair, this is the conscious evolution of the individualization process. The conjunctions initiating the last cycle in Pisces show us the interconnectedness of all species. And with Aries, we must be careful of that distortion, which is the freedom to believe and do whatever we want without having to pay any attention to anybody else. This is Jupiter, freedom at all costs, the conjunction with Uranus and Aries, busting out, breaking free. It is the expanding awareness of our collective social groups, including the evolution of collective social rights. Because Jupiter is conscious beliefs, it's also the conscious expansion of our belief systems, especially the last 2 conjunctions in Pisces. How are we dealing with all of this? Well, now we have the oppositions to Uranus, as you see on your screen here, between Jupiter and Libra, Uranus and Aries. How do I relate equally to others, both individually and collectively? And it reminded me of the Jupiter and Libra generation, not to mention Jupiter and Scorpio. These younger generations are coming in more group or collective orientated. Each generation comes in knowing what the generation before had to learn. So as we're going through all of these Jupiter and Libra inclusive versus exclusive situations and debates, these young ones are coming in going, come on people, catch up. Only one planet here, getting smaller every day. So this is going to be oppositions, necessary adjustments to relate as equals, calming down the dominating, speaking up for dominated. Either, both are going to be active, but especially can we work to calm down any violence tendencies. Again, many collective groups are going to have opportunities to expand based upon like-mindedness, and this is going to happen whether you're conservative or liberal. These 3 oppositions, again, just might make the lines in the sand deeper, wider yet. Will that wall come up between the U.S. and Mexico? can we draw a bigger circle around any lines in the sand? Stay tuned. It will be decided by all of us collectively. Look and see where you can do it in your own personal situations as well. Here's Jupiter, Neptune. They had 3 conjunctions in 2009. 26 degrees Aquarius. Remember the conjunctions Jupiter had with Chiron in Aquarius, quantum physics. So the evolution of beliefs on the broadest levels, Jupiter, Neptune, with personal Jupiter implications. Because Jupiter is our conscious beliefs and Neptune is our deepest unconscious beliefs. Here's the continual growth and expansion of them. And Jupiter's having conjunctions in Aquarius and then Pisces. And so that ability to really see and expand beliefs beyond religion into the broadest spiritual principles possible. It is the natural intent. Where will it manifest? And this says in universal source is evolving energy is what I meant. Albert Einstein quote, Aquarius, he was the famous Aquarian sun sign. Before God, we are equally wise and equally foolish. Where are we going to go with it? Stay tuned. We shall find out. Jupiter's aspects with Neptune are the same as Chiron. Jupiter's going to make 3 waning inconjuncts. So relationship adjustments when faced with the disillusionment about ourselves and others. Again, because it's a waning inconjunct aspect, the change is forced from the outside. It's forced upon us by others. Be it one-on-one relationships, Jupiter and Libra, or the ultimate relationship with Source, Neptune and Pisces, or any group relationships in between, waning inconjunct. It will be asking us how to honor and serve the divine in another without doing those famous Libra projections of ideals, which will then lead to more disappointments if we do. There's potential for relating evolution to the degree that all living beings are recognized and honored. The opposite or distortion of that is continuing to be cruel and dominate other beings, men over women, humans over other species. Jupiter, Pluto, they had 1 conjunction in 07, late degree Sag. They will have 3 conjunctions in 2020. Pluto is the first planet Jupiter's going to make conjunctions to when we go through the first 5 years of the next decade. Jupiter-Pluto as a planetary pair is the evolution of the soul, both on an individual level and on a collective level. Their conjunction in Sag was the expansion of soul truth, individual and collective beliefs, the distortions, right, wrong battles, my God is better than your God, my philosophies are better than your philosophies. We still have some potentials for understanding natural laws and principles on ever-evolving and broadening levels. Look back on your own soul's progress since 2007 and look how you have done that as an individual, regardless of where we are doing it collectively in the consensus world, if we're making baby steps at all. I think we are, slowly but surely, slowly but painfully. Wherever 28 degree Sag was in your chart by house, this is where you've been attempting to understand these broader principles and understand or natural laws. And so you can see, again, Jupiter's now going to make these last quarter squares to Pluto, 3 of them. Last quarter square, crises in consciousness with regard to personal and collective relationships. What isn't working personally? What's not fair, especially on financial levels? This is why, again, I think that the equal pay between men and women might be an issue with these 3 aspects coming up. Where are we continuing to expand our understandings? If we, start to recognize, hey, wait a minute, how come I don't have fairness and equality like you do? And where are we figuring that out, and where are we addressing it and asking for more? Have-nots have potential to gain or lose ground depending on circumstances via country or state or area they live in anywhere in the world. The haves with Pluto and Capricorn, they're not going to easily let go. Last year in, was it 2014, our little state, South Dakota, very conservative, but it had a statewide initiative on the ballot to raise the minimum wage and to tie it to COLA, which is the cost of living increases, which are inflation based. And the initiative won by a strong vote. And so our minimum wage went from, I think, $7.25 to $8.50 an hour. I could be wrong by nickels and dimes. That was in November of 2014. In January of 2015, our conservative legislature changed the public's will and decided that if you were younger than 18, that minimum wage base wasn't valid. We didn't have to pay working teenagers the same amount of money, which made it, the potential, well, let's hire them under 18 and fire those above 18 to save money. Well, citizens referred it to a vote, and we're going to vote on it this November to see whether or not we shoot down the legislature changing what we did, and a minimum wage regardless of age. That's an example of what we've been looking at here through Jupiter, Pluto. Again, Jupiter's resources. Capricorn is resources. Looking at those, the haves just not very easily letting go and sharing, and all the fear-mongering they put into everything. Jupiter and Libra may bring new understandings of the word socialism. Stay tuned. Now, the Pluto and Libra generation was those born between 1971-72 to 1983-84. And the Jupiter retrograde is again from 23 to 13 degrees. I looked through the ephemeris. It affects souls born between 1972 to 1981. Look at how it affects almost the whole works. It's that elliptical cycle of Pluto. So almost this entire Pluto generation is going to have Jupiter conjunctions to their natal Pluto. All these issues that we've been speaking about here are going to be germane and in your face if you're part of this generation. Are you including or excluding? Are you standing up for equality in your primary relationships if you're in one? Are you standing up for equality to all the different relationships going on? You can include families of origin, both the one you're born into and the one you create. It's going to energize this generation to become more active in the collective issues. Conservative versus liberal. Now, while this generation tends to be more inclusive orientated, you can find a lot of conservative Pluto in Libras. I have been interacting with a few of them in various ways. They could get, really active in, the traditional marriage and the state thing versus opening up to gender equality in regards to homosexuality or transgenders or blah, blah. Human domination over other species and other humans versus species equality and human equality. This generation is going to move into leadership roles here. We're talking souls that are in their early 30s to their early 40s. Who's going to get the urge, the impulse to Jupiter and Libra expand and grow as leaders? I do think as a general, they're going to demand more equality. They're going to be financially driven. These are the souls who are having their waxing squares from Pluto and Capricorn transiting, and we've got another 8 years to go with this cycle. We're only halfway. So are they going to be selfish in finances, or are they going to be asking for more fairness, demanding equality with pay, etc.? All of those types of things. Stay tuned. This generation with these Jupiter transits over natal Pluto, they could see relationships blow up in their face. There could be some of them who finally decide to get married. And there will be a lot of them for whom there have to be changes in the relating patterns and the relating roles to create more fairness. Here's the U.S. chart. Just wanted to briefly show you where Jupiter is. I used the Gemini rising chart for July 4th, Philadelphia, 2:13 a.m. Jupiter will make 3 waning trines to the moon. It will make 3 waxing trines to Mars, 3 conjunctions to Saturn, 3 oppositions to Chiron. And so, you're getting tired of me saying this word or this phrase, inclusive versus exclusive? Lots of heated debates. We got a trine in air signs, and Jupiter's activating the whole thing. Now, all 3 air signs have a tendency to be duality. The Gemini twins, the Libra lines in the sand, the Aquarius elitism versus everybody else, social classes. And so all of those areas are going to be up in the air, and this is where those debates are coming from. This is where the collective uprisings are coming from. Wait a minute, are we going to continue to have racial profiling and heavy-handedness with police forces? Are we going to continue to spend all kinds of money protecting our schools while we cut teachers' pay? Now, the trine also has the potential to bring some communication ease, to find compromises, to find ways to draw the circle, to find ways to get along, or perhaps the opposite. Jupiter will only make 1 square to the Sun. You may remember, no matter what July 4th chart you use, we have Sun in Cancer squares to Saturn in Libra. This is that me versus you that tends to so dominate our U.S. politics. as well as other things, but that's where it's, you know, kind of tense in that regard. Again, more of what I was saying on that other slide, inclusive, exclusive exposures, the differences will become more glaring. Social uprisings of all kind can expand. We can have, on a collective level, some of those people saying one thing and doing another. That Jupiter and Libra two-facedness. Uranus in Aries is going to expose the inconsistencies, while Pluto in Capricorn is going to continue to try and control. I'm just expecting more social unrest. It doesn't matter which political candidate in the U.S. is going to win the election. Half of the people are going to be totally pissed off and upset, and it's easy. I was in environmental politics for 6 years on a statewide level in South Dakota, and my little phrase to Leroy after 6 years in the trenches is it's so much easier to energize a no vote. It's so much easier to energize the vote against something than for something. So it's going to boil down to, you know, the majority of the people, you know, being more upset against one party versus the other party. We can expect some wild communications, breakthroughs, exposures. Really behooves us individually and everywhere else to have absolute honesty. You know, look at social media. If you say it, it's instantly out there. If you said it 20 years ago into some electronic device, it's still out there. Here's a listing of the hits for everybody, just so you can see the aspects that Jupiter makes to the U.S. chart. And of course, as I said, here are the 4 aspects while Jupiter's retrograde. They're up here the first time. And then here is the 3rd passage of these 4 aspects, as well as a few others. I used the Porphyry houses, and I left this in with Jupiter moving into from the 5th house into the 6th house. And I left this one in. I just think this is so beautiful. The gardener in me loves this. It's that spring renewal. Jupiter in Libra is a cardinal archetype. And so every new day is another dance to change your life. Remember that, everyone. Okay, that's it. I haven't even looked at the time. Hope I've done all good. Jupiter Direct will be moving forward with the ability to register for this event that we're going to create in the hills. It's going to be a combination of astrology and tours. Pahasapa is the Lakota word for the Black Hills. Leroy, did I hear you? Questions, comments from anybody in regards to anything that I didn't cover in detail or that I missed? Part 2 is next week, Jupiter in Libra through the 12 houses. That's when I'll be trying to give personal examples with charts as much as I possibly can, probably more at a generic level because I've got to get through 12 houses in 2 hours, but that part 2 is going to be more focused individually. Although you should be able to take a lot of what I said here and use it on an individual basis as well. Leroy, comments, questions from anybody on subject matter?
Nope, you're clear, and you did a great job. Thanks for the work.
Okay, all right. Well, I thank you very much, everyone. And so here I am again exactly 1 week from tonight, next Monday, we'll look at Jupiter and Libra through the 12 houses. I do have my little running list of potential fall, winter public classes that I like to do. I haven't quite decided which ones out of my potentials that I'm going to commit to. Stay tuned. More on those as time goes by. And so thank you very much, everyone, for the Mercury retrograde techno. Little tension points. We moved through them. I appreciate all of you sticking around and listening through Jupiter and Libra, and we'll see you next week.